All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We're going to start with chapter one. Remember, we've talked about circling all around. What I want to let you know is that what we're going to be covering now, we've already covered. It's a bit of a review session. We've taken notes on some of these things early on, early on. September, August, September, October, the very first sets of notes that we've taken. This is all going to fit in like that. All right. So if you want to get those notes out, kind of follow along, and that'll help. All right. So the Enlightenment plays an important role in the development of our country. We've got those Enlightenment thinkers, and they've got some crazy ideas. Okay. First off, you've got to remember way back 1776, the Americans decided to break away from the King of England in Great Britain. They felt their rights were being violated. Okay? And they were inspired by those Enlightenment principles. For example, you've got certain natural God-given rights, and then you go, wah, out your mama, you have certain rights. That there's a social contract, a contract between government and the people. All right? Now, one of these Enlightenment thinkers is John Locke. He believed in that natural law, that you're born free, that you have certain rights that just can't be taken away. And the people cannot be subjected to government without their consent. Okay? So people give permission to be governed. That whole concept of consent of the governed. Another one is Jean-Jacques Rousseau. He believes that people are the ultimate ruling class, so to speak. The people themselves. Not some royal that was supposedly given his power by God. The people hold the power. This is that concept of popular sovereignty. Now, all of these together, excuse me, recognize the flower cup? If you notice, it's made up of little flip-flops. Now, together, they form the core belief of American government, and that's republicanism. We had some problems defining it. This time has given me some time to do a little bit of research. But it's made up of three ideas. 1, 2, 3. Or for those of you that speak Spanish, numero 10, 20, and 30. Okay? But anyway, it boils down to this. Republicanism, there's the three core concepts. Number one, that we have a representative government. Number two, consent of the governed, John Locke. And then popular sovereignty, that the people hold the ultimate power, that from Jean-Jacques Rousseau. All three together make up American ideal of republicanism. All right? So, we throw this word republicanism, democracy, what does it mean? Well, first off, democracy comes from ancient Greece, demos krasi, chaotic rule almost, if you really think about it. Which is why we don't have that. We've got a republican form of government. Remember those three ideas? Right here. Oh. Okay. But there's three types of democracies. First one is the classic democracy of what we think of, the participatory democracy. This is where every eligible citizen participates. They'll go and make their voice heard in government meetings and help make decisions. You've got a small town, 200-300 people. It's reasonable. It's doable. Okay? When you've got a country the size of America, 330 million, of which at least half are eligible, if not more, it just doesn't work. So we move into the second type of democracy, and that's a pluralist democracy. Plural, many. Okay, think of that. And this is where many non governmental groups try to exert some sort of influence in government. Okay, you've got these interest groups. Remember, bureaucracy. They interact with other government agencies to find agreement among all of the groups. So there's some sort of compromise. So the idea behind this is that there's many groups, many ideas, so that not one particular idea is able to dominate, and overpower everybody else. If we take that to the next level, we get what's called hyper pluralist, meaning that the governments the factions are so varied, but they have so much power that government cannot get anything done. You get government gridlock. And then finally, the third. The elected officials act as a trustee, an overseer, and they make the decisions for the people because there's so many different ideas out there. The downfall of this is that only people with influence and resources, money, are really able to form government. But you can see how here in America, in American government, yes, we are pluralist, but we also have some elitist components to us as well. All right? Now, we've got to talk about the Declaration of Independence. Now we're getting into a little bit more history, but you're going to see, how these things show up. These Republican ideals show up in, our government. First off, the Declaration of Independence. Why did we write it? Well, Mr. Cosley, it's because they wanted to declare ourselves free from Great Britain during the Revolutionary War. That's a solid C answer. Now, yes, it was written to declare our independence, but also, more importantly, we had to show we were not traitors during this war. We needed the help of Spain, France, Poland. We couldn't do it without that help. So we had to show that we were not traitors. Countries are not going to help traitors. They're just not going to. It's going to give people in their own countries the idea, well, hey, they supported traitors, so we can be traitors. You can see how it goes. All right. And so really we had to justify why we were leaving. You write a text to your girlfriend or your boyfriend. I don't want to be dating you anymore. You cheated on me. I'm free. Okay? Think of it as a Dear George letter. Dear George, we don't want to be with you anymore. We're breaking away. Here's why. And really, there's 4 parts to the Declaration of Independence. The first one, the preamble. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary to dissolve the bonds, that first part, introducing, what's going to happen. The second part is the Declaration of Rights. This is where Thomas Jefferson kind of lays out those theories of government that the Enlightenment philosophers talked about. That men are born with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that governments are created among men to preserve these rights. And when government becomes destructive of these ends, it is necessary for the people to alter or abolish it. Consent of the governed, that social contract. So you see where these Enlightenment thinkers are, influencing Thomas Jefferson. The third part, and it's probably the longest part of it all, is where they say, King George, you did this, you did that, you did this, They list everything that he did that violated their rights. Therefore, other countries can see, well, King George taxed them without their permission. That's not a good thing. He broke up their legislative bodies. That's not a good thing. So, they can see the evidence. And then finally, the fourth part is the actual declaration: we are free and independent from you. All right. So you can see how these Republican ideals show up there. And it's definitely going to be in that Declaration of Rights, or that theory of government. That phrase, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. All right. Next, during the war, so we've declared ourselves free. Now we need a government. And that's where we create the Articles of Confederation. Again, refer back to your notes. I'm going to give you a phrase that's going to resound in your brain: the red-headed girlfriend theory. It's my own crackpot theory, yes, but it helps to explain what happened. We had just gotten rid of, broken away from a very dictatorial, very powerful central government. We're going to go for the other end. We're going to create something very weak. We didn't like this, so let's go the opposite end. And that's where the Articles of Confederation came into play. They created a very weak central government. So weak that eventually it almost acts as if there's 13 different little countries, not states acting as one, each one doing their own little thing. Some states had their own navies after this, But during the war, it gave us a framework. During the war, we had a common enemy, Great Britain. It worked. Once the war was done, not so much. One of the big weaknesses was that they didn't have the power to tax. And if you don't have money, you can't pay your bills, something's getting repossessed. All right? And really, you get down to Shays' Rebellion. I know I'm breaking a rule, touching my eye. But we get to Shays' Rebellion. I'm not going to hash it out what happened, but it showed the weaknesses of the Articles. All right? Some things happened. Finally, in 1787-ish, right in that area, they decided to call for a constitutional convention. First, to amend the Articles, make them work a little bit better. And they finally realized they're a piece of garbage. We got to get rid of them. So, one of the big issues during this whole time was how we are going to represent the states. All right? We didn't want the small states, Rhode Island, New Jersey, Connecticut. They were afraid that they were going to get overpowered by the big states. But the big states were like, hey, we've got more people. We pay more taxes. We should have more power. What's it going to be? Now, again, under the Articles of Confederation, one vote per state. Period. Rhode Island got the same amount of power as Virginia. All right? Now, remember, when I'm talking big states here, big and small states, we're talking population. All right? That's what's going to be the driving force here. And we've got 3 plans that we've got to touch on. Number 1, the Virginia plan. Virginia, big state, large population. Their plan said, you know what, we're going to create 3 branches of government, a legislative, executive, and judicial. Sounds familiar. Bicameral, 2-house legislature. So I'm starting to sound familiar, Mr. Crosby. Excuse me. But what would happen is the lower chamber would be elected by the people based on population. And then the lower chamber would elect the upper chamber. Okay? But it also had some good ideas here: separation of powers, laying out what each branch is going to be able to do. The New Jersey plan was a reaction. They're like, you know what? We don't like this. We're losing power here. We're on an equal footing under the Articles of Confederation. This plan that you're putting forth, Virginia, isn't going to protect us. So they came up with the one vote per state, but it did add some power to the Constitution, or articles, I should say. It gave the national government the power to tax. That was important, that they could pay their bills, raise an army, pay the soldiers. And you've got to remember, George Washington is like, hey guys, we won this by the skin of our teeth. If we can't get this done, we're going to be taken back over by the English. We might be the French. It might even be the Spanish. We need to get this done and solved. And then finally, we get the Great Compromise. All right? This is taking some elements from both. It took the bicameral legislature from the Virginia plan. And it said, you know what? House of Representatives, we're going to have the number based on population. The larger the population of the state, the more representatives you get. But now it's a tweak on the New Jersey plan that now we get the Senate, 2 senators per state. So, yes, large states, you've got some power in the House of Representatives. You could force through what you want, but we've got the Senate where you're all equal. Okay? So, this protected the small states. And this really sets the framework up for our government. Okay? This is what it's all based on. There's some other compromises, 3/5 compromise. We've talked about that. Slaves can, 3/5 of every slave counts for taxation and, representation. Remember we said, we needed the South's cooperation here, so not much was done about slavery. It was kind of ignored. It was a reality of the time. Now, what results of this Constitution it gets created? Now, they intentionally created a complex and competitive policy-making process. They wanted it to be the will of the people, but they wanted them to also be deliberate and think. So that's why we have the House, which would be the people's house. The people were impetuous. They didn't think. They were hot-headed. That's where the House of Representatives would be, and they'd come up with these ideas. And then you have the Senate, excuse me, which had a little bit longer-serving terms, older people, a little bit more deliberate, a little bit more mature, the graybeards, okay? And they would slow it down and say, let's think about this, all right? Now, one term that you guys had a problem with was policy. What is it? And again, I'm able to, deliberate and all of this. Policy really is the laws created by the government and how they're carried out, okay? So that's policy. The laws created by the government and how they're carried out. For example, the law is marijuana is illegal. Federally, it's illegal. That's part of the policy. The other part of policy now is the government, the federal government, takes a bit of a blind eye to marijuana use in the states. So again, and they changed banking regulations. We've talked about it, not going to beat a dead horse. Now, once we get the Constitution created, we're human beings. We argue. All right. There were those people that said, you know what, the rights of the people are not protected in this document. It creates this all powerful government, but doesn't protect the rights of the people. So we divide now into those two factions we've talked about: the Federalists that supported the Constitution, and the Anti-Federalists who were really concerned. And we've talked about, again, like I said, a lot of this is going to be review. The Anti-Federalists wanted a Bill of Rights, and again, I beat it into your heads on Chapter 7. The Bill of Rights does not give you rights. It protects your rights from the government. Now, the Federalists had a bit of a legitimate concern that if we list all of them, we might forget one. And there's been plenty of instances already where the majority has been a tyranny, and even though the state had the Constitution with their rights in it, the people in that state abused the minority. Okay? So they were afraid that someone would get looked over, and logistically it still didn't really work. All right? To think about the Bill of Rights is to think of it this way: your essential rights. Okay, we beat to death first, second, 4, 5, 6, and didn't worry about 7. A little bit of 8. The two that you really need to worry about, and you look at the 9th and 10th, and the 10th is going to show up even more in federalism. You had that. Remember how I said the Federalists had that concern we might overlook something and forget about it? That's where the 9th Amendment comes into play. Basically, it says this: if a right is listed in the Constitution, it doesn't deny that there's other rights that they have. So it's kind of like, hey, we're covering our butts by saying, yeah, we're going to list some rights, but if we don't list them all, that doesn't mean you still don't have them. It says we may list them, we may forget a couple, but you still have them. And then the other one is the 10th Amendment, and this is really going to come into play with federalism, is that those powers not delegated, not given to the federal government by this Constitution, or those rights prohibited to the states. Because if you look at, I think it's Article 11 of the Constitution, I'm looking it up right here, that okay, let me do that. But anyways, Article 11, I do believe, says, or Article 1, Section 10, I'm sorry, powers prohibited to the states. So the Constitution lays out what powers the federal government has, lays out what powers the federal government does not have, and what the states can't do. All right, that's in the Constitution. And now the 10th Amendment comes into play and says those powers not given to the national government or prohibited to the states. So Article 1, Section 8, Article 1, Section 9 and 10, prohibited powers, are retained by the states, reserved to the states. So if it's not given in Article 1, Section 8, prohibited in Article 1, Section 9, Article 1, Section 10, it's given to the states. This is where we see marriage, education, all of that come into play. All right? There we go. Chapter 1 is done. Hopefully, I'm going to upload this tonight, it being the 30th. And we'll go from there. Again, if you have any questions, shoot me an email, kcrosley@tps.org. I'll answer it. I'm keeping the whole log of it. Leave something on Google Class where I notify that this is up. Go ahead and do it. All right. See you next time, guys.